Joining me now from London is Akinola Davies. He holds joint Nigerian and British citizenship and works with a group called Nigerian Lives Matter. He's lived for years in Lagos. He frequently visits family members there. Joining me here in Washington is Adotei Akwei. He is the Managing Director for Government Relations for Amnesty International USA, and he's an expert on conflicts in Sub-Saharan Africa. Welcome to both of you to the show. Akinola, let me start with you. As I've just said, you frequently visit Nigeria, you visit Lagos, talk to family members there. What are you hearing about their concerns and the threat that this group poses in the country?
First of all, thank you for having me on, Anan. Really appreciate it. In regards to what I'm hearing from family in Nigeria, I think it's the same point of view we all share as Nigerians across the globe. We are really concerned about the lack of action from government in regards to tackling Boko Haram. Nigeria is the most populous country, as you've said in your report. It also spends 20% of its budget on military. So, it begs the question as to why the Nigerian military can't defend the people and what sort of message that sends out to the poorest communities.
Adotei, this group has made major gains in the northeastern part of Nigeria. In fact, there are very credible reports right now that they have established some kind of caliphate in that part of the country. Is this conflict confined to that part of the country, or is it spreading? And what kind of threat does it pose to the stability of the state?
It's definitely a major threat, not only to the northern part of the country, but also to the idea of governance, of the federal government being able to provide services and, as our colleague in London said, security, which is the fundamental role of the state. So were the areas to be consolidated by Boko Haram under their control, one would really begin to sort of see what, some of the more strict, harsh type imposition of Sharia law that Boko Haram has been calling for, and you would see more displaced persons fleeing the region because of this harsh treatment. And then, of course, there's the potential for it spreading, as you mentioned, to Cameroon, to Chad, and to Niger. So it is not only a threat to Nigeria, but also to the region, and I think that's why it needs to be getting much more attention than it is.
Akinola, what is the appeal of a group like Boko Haram? They clearly must have some kind of support because they have fighters within their ranks, but what is the appeal, the attraction?
Personally, I don't see any appeal. I mean, I think they are opportunists, and their confidence grows by the lack of action from the Nigerian government or any sort of military intervention. I mean, let me just make this clear. I think it's a problem for the African communities. I don't think it's a problem. I do think it's a problem for the international communities, but I don't think their involvement is currently what's needed. I think first and foremost, the Nigerian government need to address it. I don't think there is an attraction to Boko Haram. I think they sort of, like I said, their opportunities, they take over areas, and when they're met with no resistance, they build in confidence and can potentially grow in numbers. Because they continually win these areas or win these small skirmishes, that sort of leads confidence to sort of confuse people whether they want to join them.
Right, as you say, they take over areas, and I was wondering how they recruit their fighters. I mean, is it just coercion? They move into these areas, occupy these areas, and then force young men and women to join them?
I'm not as informed as to how they recruit people. Just from a common sense point of view, it makes sense that if you're occupying areas and you're not met with any resistance, it looks that you're a force to be reckoned with, and that could encourage maybe some people from an uneducated background who also feel disenfranchised from the lack of government to sort of join them.
All right, so Adotei, it's a situation where it's recruitment by coercion. It's
a recruitment by coercion. It's also, as Akinola said, the lack of governance. In other words, the military and the government have not provided the services and the leadership, not only to resist the attacks, but also to reassure the population that they are indeed focusing on their security and their safety. And this is also linked to the strategy that the Nigerian military have engaged in, which has been incredibly brutal. It's resulted in such human rights violations that it has alienated parts of the population. There's no question about that. And that, unfortunately, could be seen as a recruiting tool, although I would have to agree that there's not much there that would be an incentive for someone to join, except fear.
Right, for people to join them. Adotei, does a group like Boko Haram have links with other terror groups, perhaps in the region, perhaps in the world?
They have, I think, links in the sense that they are watching and seeing what other groups are doing. We don't have any clear evidence of direct links and coordinated strategies, but what they do have, which is equally dangerous, is of course access to a flow of arms that not only comes from hardline armed groups that were in Mali, but also the fall of the Libyan state after Muammar Gaddafi's arsenal then starts to move down south. And that, I think, has really led to the critical change in their capacity to start winning territory and to start winning battles.
Right, Akinola, at this stage, how can this group be stopped?
How can they be stopped? That's a very good question. I think with strong leadership, I think with a strong reaction from the military, or whether it's combined forces between Chad, Niger, and Cameroon. I think there needs to be some sort of strategy. I mean, I'm not a military expert, but I think in the operations of how militaries operate, there should be some strategy to counter insurgents. I mean, there's been no evidence of that working so far. So I think, you know, the Nigerian government and surrounding governments need to really think of a plan of action of how they can defend what is their most vulnerable citizens. Because listening to your report earlier, it just sounded like a bunch of figures, but those are human lives, which is the main concern of a group like us, is sort of condemning the loss of any number of human lives, whether it's 150 or 2,000. It's not acceptable.
Right, Editor, one of the disturbing trends that we've seen recently by Boko Haram is the use of young girls as suicide bombers. There was a 10-year-old who blew herself up in a crowded market, killed many people. I want you to watch a little bit of an interview with a 13-year-old girl who refused to detonate her bomb that was strapped to her by Boko Haram. Let's watch this.
My father took us to a boat which was surrounded by gunmen. I was asked if I wanted to go to heaven. When I answered, they said I should go for a suicide mission. They said if I ran, they will kill me. So we were sent to Kano. When we arrived at Kano Market, one of them said we should go separately. So I refused after my friend detonated her own explosive vest. I was wounded.
So as I was saying, a very disturbing development in Nigeria there. We also had 200 schoolgirls who were captured by Boko Haram. What of their fate? What's happened to them? There was a great big campaign right at the beginning. We even had the First Lady of the United States holding up a card saying, you know, save our girls. What happened?
Unfortunately, there's no new intelligence about their whereabouts. Certainly, they have not been returned to their families. And this is I think, the emblem or the emblematic incident for this crisis in Nigeria. The lack of the government's transparency about what it has tried to do, what it has not been able to do, and just reassuring the families that they are doing whatever it is they can to return the girls, I think it goes to the issue of leadership and governance, and that's a larger problem. The girls as individuals are precious, and we shouldn't forget about them, but we have to also see that they are also linked to the estimated 30,000 people who have been killed, whose names we don't know, whose families never found out what happened to them, to all of these people who have been displaced. I think the attack on the girls and the use of the girls also highlights the need to really address the rights of women and girls in post-conflict and conflict zones, such as in northern Nigeria. So it's a big agenda, but I think we have to keep on remembering them because they remind us that these are human beings, as Akinola
just pointed out. Akinola, you were an organizer for this campaign called Nigerian Lives Matter. You staged a rally. You were a key organizer of that rally in London. In your view, is the world paying enough attention to what is going on in Nigeria?
I think at the time of when the event started being organized, I don't think there was enough attention being paid. Subsequently, since then, with rallies such as what we had on Sunday and something that went on in Brooklyn recently, I think there's been more attention coming towards the issue. But I mean, our main problem, tagging on to what Adotei said previously, is that it took 90 days for the Nigerian government to even acknowledge that those girls were missing. I mean, there was a huge media campaign, which was the pressure in which forced them to actually acknowledge that in the first place. It's the same situation that's repeating itself here. Whilst whilst what happened in France, for example, was atrocious, and rightfully so, we should stand in solidarity with the people of Paris, they couldn't even condemn or acknowledge the victims of their own country, which I think was what was actually quite revolting for me and what stemmed us having to organize this. Because, you know, we say Nigerian lives matter. I mean, African lives in general matter, because if your own government is not going to condemn what's going on, I mean, once again, what sort of message does that send? But coming back to your question, sorry, that's a bit of a segue. Coming back to your question, I also think it's an issue for the Nigerian media and the Nigerian middle class, because those are the real people with influence. I mean, the international media can only get as much information as they receive from the source of the information. If there isn't a bridge in between that, then you can't blame the international community for not showing that. Also, it's with the middle classes, because the middle class of Nigeria in the areas that are unaffected, it might not seem like a huge issue, but the problem is the more these people continue to gain confidence, the more likely it is that the middle class might become a target for this. So it's important they take notice of this now.
Okay, sir. Akinola Davies in London, Adotei Akwei here with me in Washington. Thanks to both of you for joining us. We are going to take a short break right now. When we come back, we'll talk with an expert on Africa and a former U.S. ambassador to Nigeria. Stay with us. You're watching The Heat.